It's great to see so many people interested in law. That's super. Okay, I think I'll get us going and introduce the group. And thank you, Vivian, for starting your introductions in the chat. Feel free to do that. So allow me to just say why we're here today and welcome you from the International Center for Cooperative Management at St. Mary's University, partnering up with the International Cooperative Alliance, the Alliance and its law committee, and use Cooperativum, the Association for Research in Cooperative Law. These three organizations, plus the host organization in Croatia, Juraj Dobrila University in Pula, organized a Summer School of Cooperative Law in 2023, and we will repeat it next year. And this is a way to touch base and to hear a little bit about that experience, but also, of course, to continue conversations about the challenges of cooperative law. And I will just pass the torch to the lawyers, introducing Ifigenia Duvica, representing Youth Cooperativum in Athens, I believe you are, today. And Ifigenia will guide us through the two parts of today's event. So welcome, everybody. It's fantastic to have you here. Ifigenia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Greetings to everyone. It's a delight to see new faces, but also some old colleagues. So welcome everyone to the webinar entitled as Law and Cooperatives, Friend or Under a Question Mark. The webinar's duration is 90 minutes, and we have the following structure. The first part of the webinar, we will invite speakers, Mr. Santos Kumar and Dr. Hagen Henry, to shed some light on cooperative law matters and also tell us what do we celebrate, upon which subjects on cooperative law we should reflect, and what do we discuss, what do we need to focus our discussion upon. Following then, after the invited speakers, we have the real protagonists of the webinar, which are the participants of the previous summer school on cooperative law in Pula, Croatia. We have Julia Martins Rodriguez, Tom Beckett, and Carolina Babik, who will join us after. And they will describe the experiences during the summer school and whether there were some lessons learned and lessons learned, whether they could be applied in their professional life, but also what kind of impact did it have in their discussions, in the way that they reflect upon cooperative law. Then we will have a short break, and then we are entering into the real adventure, which is rather an interactive exercise. We will be divided in breakout rooms, and we will invite you to reflect collectively on legal issues from the national context of the countries where you have been active. And afterwards, we go back to the plenary and collect all our thoughts and matters and perhaps some recommendations or following up steps. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Santos Kumar to introduce himself, but also share some thoughts of his. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ifigenia. Pardon me for my voice. I seem to have lost it because of the changing weather in Brussels. So please excuse me if I sound like this. I mean, I do sound like that. So anyway, but good day, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you greetings from the president of the ICA, Dr. Ariel Guarco, our Director General, Mr. Jeroen Douglas, and my colleagues spread across 12 ICA bodies around the world. My greetings to the people behind this webinar and to the members of ICA Cooperative Law Committee who have made this day possible. In addition, my gratitude to the International Center for Cooperative Management at the St. Mary's University and Youth Cooperativum Association for their invaluable leadership in promoting and defending the knowledge and education related to cooperatives. Today, the international community celebrates the United Nations Day, the anniversary of the entry into force of the UN Charter, which binds the world in a blue ribbon of peace, progress, and prosperity. The perilous state of affairs in more and more parts of the world and the UN Secretary General's own admission that this is a troubled world can cause even the best among us, best among us to lose focus on the unity of nations. And we cannot afford that. In September this year, the UN General Assembly adopted the Pact for the Future, the Global Digital Compact, and the Declaration for Future Generations as three milestone documents aimed at adapting the UN system to respond more effectively to the changes and challenges and to provide solutions for all. The cooperative enterprise is an international model as it is local. These are not my words, but those of Professor Ian Macpherson, who is considered as one of the key architects of the ICA statement on the cooperative identity. While every cooperative has and deserves its own history and legacy, they are also bound by the values and principles developed over decades, starting in 1895 and defined in 1995 as the Statement on the Cooperative Identity. The ICA claims to be the global custodian of cooperative values and principles, and it can do so by virtue of cooperative legislation around the world that aims, at least in theory, to harmonize the practice of cooperation and is obliged to translate the cooperative identity into legal rules. It is indeed a cause for celebration that there is a set of principles that are legally relevant and shared by 3 million cooperatives and almost 1/8 of humanity that practices them through their membership. The 6th Committee of the United Nations, the Legal Committee, meets every year in the last week of October to discuss those legal issues that require concerted international efforts. This is done under the auspices of the 6th Committee and with the assistance of the International Law Commission. And this week is called the International Law Week. Professor Hagen Henry, who has devoted much of his life to promoting the international character of cooperative law, together with other members of the ICA Cooperative Law Committee and the wider association and community of cooperative lawyers, is selflessly striving to position cooperative law at the highest policy tables, as well as in the classrooms where tomorrow's leaders sit today. I must thank him for his generosity and cooperation with the ICA and cooperatives worldwide in pursuing his mission to make this a better world, including through the dissemination and development of the knowledge and practice of cooperative law. Ladies and gentlemen, it will be our aspiration in 2025 to advocate that the 6th Committee of the United Nations and the International Law Commission include the special character of cooperatives and the legal rules that govern them, and by virtue of this, to support our member organizations to adequately advocate for legal frameworks that establish appropriate rights, responsibilities, and benefits for cooperatives in areas such as taxation, competition, labor, procurement, and more. As the UN legal officers, ICJ judges, and other relevant parties mark the beginning of the International Law Week, I am proud and emotional at the same time that some of the most important advocates of cooperative law are here to begin a journey of sorts towards the International Summer School on cooperative law in 2025, and hopefully other events focusing on cooperative law and public policy in the UN International Year of Cooperatives. Allow me to say that cooperatives are indeed a key actor in achieving sustainable development for all, and this will be possible, as many lawyers will argue, through adequate cooperative law and its proper implementation that promotes social, economic, and environmental justice in that order. I wish us all a very happy United Nations Day and reaffirm our belief in multilateralism and a united world. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Mr. Kumar, for the inspiring, as always, words. And then I would like to invite to the floor Dr. Hagen Henry, one of the most eminent scholars on cooperative law, to share his thoughts on a cooperative law overview.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Virginia. My voice is slightly better than Santos, but not a lot. Now, having listened to... Can you hear me? Yes. Having listened to Santos, you will understand how much it's a pleasure for me to work with him. So, good afternoon from my side, from Geneva. Hello, wherever you are. I'm very happy, in fact, to get into that Pula feeling again. And instead of making a long list of thanks, I would just like to thank Sonia for driving us, for having driven us and driving us in the future. Now, in Pula last year, we dealt with a rather simple question. And next year, well, the question is, or was, what is cooperative law? And next year will be the same question. And this question has a rather simple answer. And I read to you what I sort of developed during the course in Pula, what cooperative law is. Cooperative law are all those legal principles, legal rules, and legal practices that translate the cooperative principles in a way which allows to recognize cooperatives as legal persons, and which compels and allows cooperatives to contribute to the pursuit of the legal goal of sustainable development. Now, according to the 1995 ICA statement on the cooperative identity, which you see on the screen, so if you read the sentence which links the values and the principles, so according to this statement, the cooperative principles are guidelines through which cooperatives, as defined in that statement, put the values on which they are based according to that statement into practice. Now, what makes me so sure about the delimitation of cooperative law by the cooperative principles and the legal goal of sustainable development? And the answer is, what makes me sure is law, and more precisely, public international law. There are sufficient phenomena to demonstrate that several sources of public international law, according to the statute of the International Court of Justice, converge on the cooperative principles predetermining the substance of cooperative law, and that it must be sustainable development compatible. Numerous international instruments have declared what more recently the 2021 and 2023 biannual United Nations Secretary General reports on cooperatives in social development emphasize in detail. Cooperative law must respect the cooperative principles, and it must further sustainable development. So why do I say that at length? Because that has taken us a huge step towards something which I would like to emphasize. A step from the formal notion of cooperatives, well, cooperative law is what the legislator says, to a substantive notion of cooperative law. Cooperative law, not only the law on cooperatives, and Santosh has said that already, there are other laws which impact cooperatives: taxation, labor law, competition law, auditing standards, what have you. Constitution, of course. And I think in the future, we should pay more attention to other types of law than national state law, and by extension, regional and international law. There are other types of law by which people live, and I think especially many people whom we are seeing forming cooperatives do live by other legal standards than the national legal standards. Now, of course, we have challenges. Apart from more legal technical ones, I think the outstanding challenge is that how do we get from these cooperative principles via legal principles to legal rules? This sounds easy, but it is highly complicated. And doing that, we should avoid, by all means, to sort of come up with a uniform cooperative law which would be applicable everywhere. Now, why should we avoid that? There is, first of all, a formal argument to avoid that, and that is very simple. We are talking about the cooperative principles, and they're not rules. So they allow for a wide spectrum of legal rules, legal principles, and practices to be derived from these principles. The other argument is that we need a diversity of laws, including cooperative laws, as development, and hence sustainable development, has two aspects, namely biological diversity and cultural diversity, and these are the only sources of development. Why is that so important? When we look at sustainable development, as you know, of course, it has 3 or 4 aspects, it doesn't matter, but one is essential, it is center, it leverages the others, and that is social justice. And here you see how close we are with our theme to sustainable development, because there is something about social justice in the definition of, in the objective of cooperatives, according to the definition of cooperatives. And that is, as I say, I mean, this is the potential contribution of cooperatives to sustainable development, to make sure that it pursues this threefold objective, which is economic, social, and cultural. And by that, regenerating social justice. How can that be done? I think the most effective mechanism to regenerate social justice is the democratic participation and the production, in the decision on what and how to produce, and on the way to distribute the produced wealth. Now, often member democratic participation is understood as this one member, one vote rule in principle 2. Well, as I always say, I think this is the least important. When you look carefully at the statement, you will detect that member democratic per head participation runs, in fact, through all the elements of the statement. It is what I call a meta principle. Now, how to materialize that? That is the complex issue. How do you materialize that in new cooperative structures where private and public actors and interests come together? Healthcare cooperatives, for example, where cooperative structures mix non-commercial and commercial approaches, cooperative groups, or in structures which sort of fuse the figures of producer, distributor, and consumer, for example, in energy cooperatives. And how do you put into practice this, what I call the meta principle of member democratic participation, where cooperatives integrate organizationally in global value chains? And there are some more issues which we might discuss if you are interested. And of course, the bigger issue, I think, because it has a political angle to it, how can we make sure that this member democratic participation is put into place at the same time when legislators continue to what we call companize the cooperatives, that is, to approximate the legal features of cooperatives ever more with those of capital-centered companies. And that leads me to almost the final point, which I think Sonja is raising everywhere. As long as we don't get the subject of cooperatives, and I would say again, into the research and education curricula, including those concerned with law, I don't think much will happen. So I said, well, we're going to deal in Pula 2 with the same issues. So why would you have to come? No, I think I'll do my best not to entertain you exclusively with things I've said last year. And I promise I will not do that. So thank you. And I hope to see most, if not all of you, next year in Pula. Thank you.
Many thanks to Dr. Hagen Henry of covering almost all relevant and key topics on cooperative law, a real capacity, if I may say so. And you have now a first taste on all the discussions that were ongoing during the summer school, because during the summer school we really had the opportunity to interact with each other with the guidance of Dr. Henry, and really reflect upon these issues and other issues as well. Now, without further ado, I would like to
But
invite...
before you do, sorry,
Yeah.
don't hide your contribution, nor that of Santosh, nor that of Sonja and the participants.
Sure.
But you three, at least, and Julia, excuse me, I think you made a substantial contribution to Pula 1. Sorry.
No problem at all. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. It was, I think, a great opportunity because we don't have a lot of opportunities to just think intensively on key issues that are really attract our scientific curiosity and interest. So without further ado, I would like to invite Julia to share her experiences on during the summer school and highlight whether there have been any lessons learned, any applications of the knowledge that you brought in your luggage back to your country, and whether there has been any kind of impact. So, Julia, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you, Eugenia. Thank you for inviting me. It's really wonderful to see our group from Pula here again, and it's a pleasure to be here. I also see lots of new faces, new names. So let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Julia Martins. I'm a Brazilian attorney and researcher based in Boulder, Colorado, and I work at the International Center for Cooperative Management from St. Mary's University. And for several years, I've been deeply interested in cooperative law, with my primary focus being domestic, national, state level laws and regulations. However, I realized that to truly understand the broader picture, I needed to look beyond these local frameworks and explore how cooperatives fit within this, larger international legal infrastructure. So gaining this system-wide perspective is essential to understanding this overarching legal architecture in which co-ops operate. And that's why attending the summer school in Croatia came at the perfect time for me, as I had just begun teaching a course on public policies and current issues for the ICCM Masters of Management for Cooperatives and Credit Unions, a course I still teach today. And my experience in Croatia helped me place policy in the context of global cooperative framework, which has greatly enriched my teaching, I believe, with a more comprehensive perspective. And this international legal framework offers more like clear advantages for cohesion and movement building, as cooperatives face all these challenges to expand their market reach and gain recognition within the mainstream business environment. Having a strong theoretical foundation strengthens our advocacy efforts, our policy development, and consumer awareness. And outside the classroom, I've been able to deeply apply these insights. In June, I was appointed by the governor of Colorado as a commissioner at the Office of Economic Development, specifically in the newly created Office of Employee Ownership. And in that role, I help develop and oversee public policies and state programs that support worker cooperatives and other employee-owned enterprises. So this system level thinking I began cultivating in Croatia has been critical to this work, to this mandate, and ensures that when we are discussing and creating these policies, we stay grounded in the cooperative identity and its core principles and values. And I must say that one of the best parts of the school, honestly, was connecting with like-minded peers and starting to really collaborate with them after Pula. So Tom Beckett and I actually wrote a book chapter for a project led by Eugenia. And recently, Santosh was a guest lecturer in one of my master's classes, generously sharing his expertise with my students. And these relationships make me think more and more on the power of cooperation and how even in the most complex networks within cooperative ecosystems, they always start at this basic level of personal relationships that I hope to, continue for many, many years. So in both my academic and policy roles, this broader international perspective and the relationships I built, and the things I learned through these relationships have shaped how I approach cooperatives and employee ownership. So it's an exciting time to be a part of this movement. I highly recommend this school, and I'm grateful to be here with all of you to continue these important conversations. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. You have been very, very active. Thank you for the kind words. It was true that we had the opportunity during the summer school to have to zoom out a bit and have the broader picture, but also going deep into the definitions, so the very basic. Also, Professor Novkovich made a link with the economics. So we had the link and bridging, the gap between cooperatives, law, policy, and the economic field. And Mr. Kumar was kind enough to share his thoughts on the international developments and also on the particularities of the Indian system and the best way to comprehend your own national cooperative legislation is to have a glance at what happens in other regions and in other countries. So, many thanks and congratulations, Julia. Very happy and very proud for you. Tom Beckett. Dear Tom, would you like to take the floor and share your thoughts and experiences as well?
Sure, thank you. I have been an attorney for several decades. I have been deeply involved with co-ops for about 15 years here in the United States. I'm executive director of a cooperative development center, a non-governmental organization that helps direct start co-ops, grow co-ops across the state of North Carolina. And part of that work is, continuing a law practice focusing on cooperatives. And so I was very interested in the International Cooperative Law Program, not for, I guess, direct career reasons, but, to expand my knowledge about what a cooperative is really and, get a taste of other perspectives. And I think that's, the first and most important thing I got from the program was getting my head out of the United States paradigm of what a cooperative is. And I, have very firm opinions on the United States paradigm. I think it's very effective, but the summer program really opened my eyes to other ways of thinking about what is a co-op, or even what is law, something that, practitioners usually take for granted. But when you get into a multinational arena, you have to step back and think about what is law even. And so it was a good perspective on just the variety of ways that the cooperative concept as a concept that is in many ways independent of law, any particular national law is realized and enabled in different countries. And so that, I'd say, I had several light bulb moments during that time. And it also gave me, sort of looking back at the US paradigm and at what Professor Hagen-Henry calls corporatization, sort of the creeping neoliberalism that affects co-ops that operate at a big scale, and how that understanding of US corporation law really doesn't and should not apply to cooperative law in many ways. And so I, came back with a completely different framework than, as far as what is the role of a member, what is the relationship between the cooperative and the members. So it's, some heady and really stimulating stuff. I also want to say that, it wasn't all just intellectual stimulation either. It was just tremendous meeting people from many different countries who are in the same field as I am, and their perspectives. And it was, it was unusual being the only native speaker of English in the whole program. And so, it gave me perspective that way. And then, Pula itself is just a beautiful city on the Adriatic. The food is delightful. The landscape is delightful. It was just a wonderful place to be. So there was plenty of aesthetic stimulation as well as intellectual, and some good friendships and relationships. Did I miss anything?
No, that's the end of the webinar. We can now go home. Thank you, Tom, really. Thank you. And if I may say so, Tom had a very insightful comments as always. And unfortunately, we were too curious and we were keep letting him go back and think of the US framework on cooperatives because we really wanted to know more about that. And thank you for the overarching comments and also for mentioning companization because I think this particular phenomenon exceeds the paradigm of law and policy because it has intruded in the way that we think of law and think about democracy and think about the position of the members. And now, from Tom, I'm going to invite Carolina. Carolina was the philosopher of the group with very intriguing questions and let us question almost everything. So Carolina, please take the floor and share your thoughts on that.
Yes, hi. Well, thank you for being here and to see all of you, some of you again. Yes, I come from Maribor, Slovenia. By education, as Evgenia said, I'm a philosopher. Most of my life, I've been working in civil society organizations in the field of supporting social and solidarity economy initiatives in Slovenia, mostly cooperatives. I also work partly as a researcher at the University of Ljubljana at Faculty of Social Sciences, and also I teach social economy subject at the Doba Business School in Maribor. So questions of law regarding cooperatives, they're important for me in aspects of advocacy, counseling, education, research. But I am not a lawyer, so this, I mean, as Julia and Thomas already said many things, I can maybe add a perspective of me being there at this summer school about the law and not being a lawyer. And before applying for the summer school, I thought, I'm not a lawyer. I should not go to a summer school on law because this is not a place for me. But I was wrong because thinking that I was wrong because it was unbelievable how Professor Henry could swim between all of us being from so many different countries and not being all lawyers, being many other occupations. So I must say this summer school in Pula really enriched me personally and professionally. And there are a couple of things I can maybe share from my experience that is related to me being there, not being a lawyer at the summer school about the law. So one of these aspects is that really changed my view regarding law, regarding cooperatives is before attending the summer school, I always thought about cooperative law, not only law on cooperatives, but the entire cooperative law as something about the form of cooperative. This is how I saw it. This is how in my teaching or helping cooperative initiatives or being part of some advocacy campaigns for cooperatives, I was always thinking law, cooperative law is all about the form, how the cooperatives are formed. And Professor Henry opened this, for me, important topic that changed my view, that putting the objective of cooperatives in front and also putting the objective of cooperatives as the main is the main part of the cooperative law also, and seeing that the form is only a function of the objective and that actually cooperatives differ from other companies by the objective and not primarily by the form. It really, this emphasis really changed my way of how I help cooperatives develop their bylaws, and how I engage now after this summer school in advocacy campaigns, and how I see the relation between the development of cooperatives in regard to the law, to the cooperative law. So I guess this duality of form and objective, it really the summer school really gave me some thoughts about it, and it really impacted my way of thinking and the way I work in research and education in social economy and in advocacy in civil society organizations. And there is one more thing that I would like to add in this regard. There are many things that really impacted me in the summer school, but I guess I had to choose a couple to share with you. Another thing very important is that as many those of us who really find ourselves as being in love with cooperatives, as being really friends of cooperatives, and being part of maybe some initiatives for advocacy for cooperatives in our countries, that usually we think that we have to advocate for cooperatives and for the laws for cooperatives. And this is again one emphasis that I think that Professor Henry opened up very well, and the discussions that came were interesting, that it's not about developing laws for cooperatives, but laws on cooperatives which are for society and for development of societies. And it kind of really gave me a critical distance on how I see development of cooperatives and what I can do in advocacy for cooperatives, not the law for cooperatives, but laws which are very good for society, but include cooperatives. So I guess, yes, this is something that I really took home from the summer school, and it started to, and I started to implement into my teaching, research, and what I do with civil society organizations in advocacy. It changed my perspectives and the way how I explain maybe students, or how I help people who develop cooperatives. Yes, kind of a distance and new words and new ways how to explain things and how to think about cooperatives. So I'm very grateful for this experience. It was amazing. And I think I made great friendships and already some new collaborations, as already Julia and Thomas mentioned. There are some projects and publications that are growing from this unbelievable, beautiful group of people that were there, and good food and drinks, and each night after being very tired after a full day of Professor Henry really has a lot of energy, so it was difficult to go through the day with him. But at the evenings, we had these beautiful conversations, and we made friendships, I believe, yes, long-term friendships. So this would be from my side. I'm not sure it was philosophical, but it was honest.
Carolina, thank you. 2 comments, if I may. We still do not know what is the secret for the energy, Dr. Henry, but hopefully next year we will find out. So with regard to the content and your comments on cooperative law and the discussions that we have during the summer school, I applaud your capacity to find the central key issues and ideas and bringing them to the fore. First, the purpose of cooperatives and cooperative law, and second, the difference of cooperative law of cooperatives, on cooperatives, and for cooperatives, because usually in advocacy, we think that a good cooperative law is a synonym for a favorable cooperative law. But what that means, I will just will not further explain, and to be continued next year. And with that, we will have a 5-minute break, and then the real adventure, the interactive exercise that we have for all of you will begin. And in the meantime, please reflect upon the pressing legal issues in your context and whether you would comment that the legal framework of the country where you are located and you are active could be commented as a friend or foe for cooperative. So 5-minute break, and then we will go back and be divided into breakout rooms. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone from the short break. Now we have the second section of our webinar, and the most interactive one. We will be divided into breakout rooms where everyone is invited to reflect upon the following question. What is one legal issue that you find over and over again based on your experiences, your knowledge, your ideas, emerging from the national context, the country where you are active or the country where you come from, related to cooperatives and cooperative law, and whether there is a couple of minutes more to also reflect upon solutions. So, key problems or issues that you would consider them as problems, as issues, and whether we have some room for solutions on that. In each breakout room, we will have a moderator and also one volunteer, hopefully we will have enough, one volunteer that will be the rapporteur to share a couple of key issues that were discussed so that they can be presented at the plenary.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm just going to launch the breakout rooms.
Okay, we are all back, I hope. Shall we start with the key notes and, sorry, with the key issues that were discussed during the rooms?
Yeah, do you want to call on the rooms in order? You guys know what the order was? We don't have
And
the
there was a
number.
total of 7 rooms, Iphigenia, if you'd like to call out the rooms to share 2 to 3 insights.
Okay, okay. Well, the first one was ours, and I was the rapporteur, so it's a bit unfair, but whatever.
Start from there.
Okay, many quite interesting discussions, and to the moment that the discussion went very interesting, we had to go back to the plenary. Some of the thoughts that were discussed, equal treatment, especially when it comes to fundraising. Another thought was the diversity among the national cooperative laws and whether they are consistent and whether there is a need of some sort of standardization, especially because there is a common cooperative identity. One other aspect that was shared had to do with the diversity, the divergence between the law and its implementation. We had an example coming from Israel that mentioned that there is a very different, there is a difference between what the law says and how the law is implemented. And the last point was the ignorance on cooperative models that sometimes is also reflected in the legal and the policy landscape. So the second breakout room, please take up the floor.
Rosa, can you see who was in it? So that because we don't know the numbers, who's in what room.
Oh, okay, just one moment. Let's see. Well, Sonia, you were in room number 2.
Well,
So-
then Cheryl will report. There we go. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. So we had, I'm in the US in Washington State, and I'm looking for my counterpart person with Sonia, who is based in Canada.
Raphael?
Yeah, Raphael, thank you. I just was looking for him. I couldn't find him. So we talked about kind of in both of our countries, lack of national cohesion, lack of national kind of legislative support related to co-ops, and fragmentation of legislation across, in Canada, the provinces, in the US, many states that are very, very fragmented as to how strong the co-op law is from state to state. And even when there is good legislation, like in my state, we do have quite a few statutes. We have a huge problem with the state apparatus understanding it and processing it well. So a huge gulf in lack of education in the state administration. Just basic stuff like on their forms, not even having like cooperatives as an option, you know, just for when most people are looking at those things. And so it makes the lawyer's role very important to help bridge those gaps. But also that can be an accessibility issue for a lot of cooperatives. And then we talked a little bit about the advocacy side of that and some things that are happening right now to try to make the state more aware, and doing this by proposing legislation that incentivizes, especially here, we're looking at incentivizing people who are retiring from their businesses to sell those businesses to their workers. And so that has been a vehicle to create a commission here in the state and then through that commission, we're trying to get more education of the administrative staff and those systems, you know, to be more co-op friendly. And Raphael talked about a similar idea of a commission with lawyers on it in Canada to help with these types of issues. So, am I leaving anything out, Sonia, that you caught?
I'll just add that what we can learn from is the tax law in the United States that we've heard also from Tom in the past is really good.
It is.
However, what Cheryl pointed out is that as the access to this favorable tax is very convoluted, and you need a lawyer to get to it, apparently.
Well, either a lawyer or some kind of advocate that understands, yeah, because the system doesn't provide those options to people when they're, you know, signing up for how they're going to be taxed. If you wouldn't know how to do it because it doesn't provide that option.
Right, but the tax law we know is really good in the US, so that's something for the movement to take a look at. And one thing for Rafael, who is now in Canada but is Brazilian, he is looking at the lessons from Brazil that can be applied in the Canadian context. And I'll just say here that Julia, who you heard speak, is also Brazilian, so you guys will need to talk to each other. So we'll put you in touch. But yeah, but I think that's also an important international kind of way of thinking about the context you're in. So thank you. That was great.
Thank you, room 3, or room 2 rather, and I'll welcome room 3, and that is Carolina's group.
So I volunteered to share. I'm an attorney between Austin, Texas and Charlottesville, Virginia, getting into co-op law. And Gabriella was also in the room in DC. So we were talking about getting into this area. And yeah, I think similar to what was just said, it seems like the law is can be quite favorable to co-ops in the US, but choice of entity and resulting tax implications are not always very clear to people who are organizing at the outset. And you just don't know what you don't know until there's a problem. And we also talked a bit about how in our law school experiences, there wasn't, I mean, for me, I was sort of on more of a legal aid track when I was in law school. So transactional work was not really front of mind for me. And so, yeah, now I'm just learning a lot, which is fine.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else from room 3 want to elaborate? Going once, going twice. All right. We'll have someone from room 4. That is Karen Miner's room, Santosha's room. You have the floor.
Well, we made sure not to identify anyone to report back, but I could try to dive in. There were just 3 of us, Santosh, myself, and Alexander Gurkov from University of Helsinki. A few key points to raise as we talked just generally about the corporatization of co-ops, and that being a big issue. And then I like the way Santosh had said it, that there's like a lack of effort and improper implementation of this sort of ability to stay co-op aligned by legislation, courts, lawyers throughout the system. flag about in the global south, often there's a primacy of regulators and a heavy hand of the state, and this can undermine autonomy and independence of co-ops. And lastly, raising the big question of the role of capitalization of co-ops and whether and how there's a role for non-user investors in that. So those were a few of the headlines I would throw in from our discussion.
Any other headlines from room 4? That was great, Karen. Thank you. All right, room 5. This is Hagen's room. Professor Hagen Henry.
I think it would be unfair for me to report. So, I mean, I would, I don't know, Tom.
I can report from that room. I took some notes. My name is Annalise Lotman. I'm with the Texas Rural Cooperative Center. Laura, I sent you a DM. Let's connect about Texas cooperatives.
Cool.
And so we had 3 people in our room. There was, or 4 of us, including me, Tom Webb and Suzanne Dondino. I'm gonna take a shot at it. And then Professor Henry. We talked about similarly the fragmentation of laws in the US and Canada, and the lack of sort of overarching federal cooperative opportunities, that it's state by state or province by province, and what a challenge that creates, how few of the state actors involved in business registration or the oversight of business know anything about cooperatives, and how much time we spend assisting them in understanding the co-op model. We talked a bit about housing and other social needs, and the sort of paradox that on the one hand, groups who aren't super wealthy, who aren't billionaires, must create these resources for themselves, while at the same time the legal framework that most people are operating under is heavily weighted in favor of very wealthy individuals or highly resourced organizations. And so there's this opportunity for cooperatives to be part of the antidote to that, but the pieces aren't really in place for that to happen in any way that's easy or fast or consistent. And we also spoke about labor law and the relationship between labor law and co-op law, and how to think about worker ownership in the context of labor and employment law, how to fit those two things together in a way that's fair and just for the workers and recognizes the rights of ownership that they have. It was a really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, room 5. Appreciate it greatly. And now we have room 6. This is the room of Urban and Julia.
Well, does anyone want to share? We haven't assigned anybody. But it was an interesting group, very diverse. We have people from the UK, South Africa, and Canada, US, Brazil. So it was a pretty diverse group. And we touched on a variety of subjects, but something that caught really my attention, it was Arvind mentioned this advocacy effort with the association to change a local law that hasn't been updated since the 1800s, and that until 2 years ago would not grant limited liability to co-op members in joining a cooperative. That was a huge disincentive for people to join a co-op in the region. So it's just an interesting way to think about, yes, cooperatives and policies can help cooperatives to grow and thrive. But on the other hand, laws can also be an obstacle and pose additional challenges for a framework that is already so complex and often not cohesive. So it was interesting to tap into those challenges and also the role of organizations, not only the second tier cooperatives like the neighboring food co-op, but also individual cooperatives, and engaging and strengthening those advocacy efforts to change local laws and policies on cooperatives.
Thank you, Julia. And last but certainly not least, we have room 7, and this is Thomas Beckett's room.
Yes, and I had Valerie Carruthers and Vivian Woodell with me, and we had a great discussion. Felt like we were just getting started when the time came to quit. And I guess Vivian shared in the United Kingdom that the cooperative law and interpretation of that is very strict in terms of a co-op can only transact with its members and nobody else, and it must transact with all of its members in order to retain that status, that there is a regulator that does not really understand what co-ops are. And I think that's this, very similar to in the United States, that there is not an understanding of co-ops as a solidarity organization for mutual benefit, rather than something that's strictly limited either to sort of charitable, which in the eyes of most regulators, co-ops don't fit, or cooperative, which then can't really do any of the public benefit things. Valerie in Canada in particular highlighted that sort of mismatch and misunderstanding between the activities of a cooperative to benefit the public and what is their what their charitable entity statutes allow. So I think the common thing is co-ops can and should by nature operate for a public purpose, and not just for this narrow member economic benefit. It's not member self-interest, it's member collective interest. And it seems like none of our jurisdictions really get that. So that's a big advocacy piece for all of us. I think it's great that we're sort of meeting internationally across international boundaries to sort of start to get on the same page and same understanding as in terms of what a co-op should be and what we should advocate for in our own legal standards. Check. Did I get that right, Vivian? Valerie?
I've put a comment on the notes just to say exactly what I said about mutual status, but don't worry, it's fine.
Oh yes, thank you. And I do want to say that the U.S. Tax code, the national tax code, is good in that it gives a favored status. Business done with members is not considered to be taxable income. On the other hand, as Julia noted, business that's done with members has to be distributed to members, cannot be restrained. So we have this very hard constraint on accruing financial reserves, capital reserves, because those reserves would be subject to income tax at the corporate rate. So we've got one good thing and one bad thing, and we need to work on all that. Check.
Check. Thank you so much, Thomas and Group 7. And Iphigenia, back to you.
Okay, Hagen, would you like to have one very short comment?
No, just to really thank everybody, also for the discussion I had in the small group, and repeat what I said at the beginning. I'm really looking forward to meeting as many of you as possible next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Hagen. Likewise, I have the sense of hearing all of the rapporteurs of the different breakout rooms. I do have a sense that there is a commonality, irrespective of the region. And if I may dare to say that all the issues that we were able to identify might be linked with the very essence of cooperative law, which is the cooperative identity. And with that, I would like to invite Sonia to have some closing remarks.
Wow, thank you. This time flew for me. I don't know about you. And again, I'm not a lawyer. Who knew? But I know because I had fun with all of you lawyers in Croatia. But just to invite you to fill out the evaluation form, because we are asking for input on the questions for the next year's summer school. And although Hagen, I'm sure, will have to repeat certain things he's done last time, it would be really great to hear from you in terms of, the topics to identify and hopefully publicize after it. So we shouldn't really keep it with the group that's in the room, although I hope we'll have 50 people there at least. But to try and get it out in some newsletters or some policy formats or whatever, we'll talk about that. So I think we need to get it out to this community and discuss and have further discussions and conversations and opportunities like this one, maybe another webinar to try and nail down a question and kind of drill down to it. So we'll be talking some more with all of you. I am really appreciative of this group and amazed how many people signed up who are from very different parts of the world, and learned a lot today as always. So this has been great. Thank you so much. I think we're right on time. Iphigenia, we do have 5 minutes. If anybody else wants to say something, I think I'm done, and I thank you for being here. Iphigenia, back to you.
Well, I would like to invite everyone for some last thoughts or last comments, and definitely the time passed by for a legal relevant session. It definitely passed by. I wish that we had more time to exchange ideas. But if there are no further questions, I would like to thank each and every one of you, the organizers. A special shout out to Sonia and Rosa for being the mastermind behind everything that you saw today. Please do not forget to fill out the form.
Yes, and thank you. Thanks for mentioning Rosa. So this is Rosa Poirier-McKeegan with the center, and she's really kept us to the task. So thank you so much, everybody. Hope to see you soon in cooperative circles, wherever that will be. Bye, everybody.